They mocked Kesta Rill's broken war compass before the Dragon King because a dead village's relic was easier to laugh at than a dead village's question. The needle had not pointed north in 7 years. It had learned that north was useless when the dead were buried under other names. It had not pointed anywhere useful since the night Lornhollow burned blue. Still, Kesta carried it on a strip of black cord beneath her servant collar, where the cracked brass case rested against her breastbone like a second, colder heart. She had cleaned bloodless ash from victory armor with that compass hidden under her dress. She had carried dragon wine to generals who toasted the conquest of places they could not pronounce. She had stood at the edges of royal war trials while nobles described destroyed villages as necessary smoke. No one had ever asked why the compass still moved when the dead were named. The war compass did not find roads anymore. It found where death had been filed wrong. Today, they asked nothing again. Ashgrave Throne Hall blazed with victory fire. Blue dragon flame burned in long trenches cut into the black marble floor, throwing cold light over banners stitched from conquered silks. Above the dais, the Dragon King's throne rose from a ring of fused swords, its back shaped like two folded dragon wings. Beneath the throne, the marble looked darker than the rest of the hall, almost as if the stone had been burned from underneath. Not buried, filed. Kesta noticed. War servants survived by noticing what power stepped over. Dragon King Othric Mauldan sat above the hall in black gold armor, one gauntlet resting on the throne arm, his face carved into the calm of a man who had won too often to explain victory. He was not old, but the court treated him like something older than law. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes were the color of emberlight seen through smoke. Behind him, half visible in the high blue flames, his dragon name shimmered in the air like a living crest. Emberhold. The name should have roared with him. Instead, it flickered. The buried command had not killed the dragon name. It had gagged part of it. A dragon name did not flicker from age. It flickered when some part of its command had been buried. Only once. Kesta saw it and looked away before anyone could notice. She had noticed. Highgrave Marshal Vano Carrick stood beside the trial brazier in robes the color of old bone. His office belonged to the aftermath of war, counting dead commanders, sealing battlefield graves, naming enemy losses into royal ledgers, so conquest could become history instead of murder. Thin grave rings circled his wrists, each ring etched with the name of a conquered place. Kesta hated his hands. They had signed Lornhollow into the ash ledger without ever touching its ashes. "Bring the war servant forward," Vano said. 2 guards pushed Kesta into the open space before the throne. She did not stumble. That was the only rebellion left to her. A few nobles laughed when they saw the compass cord at her throat. One of them, Lord Parves, leaned toward a woman in blue silk. "The Lornhollow girl still carries her toy." Toy. Kesta kept her face still. The compass had belonged to her father, who mapped safe routes through siege smoke for villagers fleeing dragonfire. It had belonged to her mother after him, though she never used it for roads. She used it for names. When bodies could not be found, the needle turned toward the last place their death had been hidden. It did not need bones. It needed a false record. In Lornhollow, after the fires died, the compass spun until the brass cracked. Then it stopped pointing north. Othric's gaze dropped to the cord at Kesta's throat. "Show it," he said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. Kesta reached beneath her collar and drew out the broken compass. The cracked brass caught the blue flame, dull and scarred. Its glass face was split across the center. The needle hung crooked, trembling toward nothing. A ripple of amusement passed through the court. Vano smiled with his mouth only. "The servant insists the device has war standing." "I never said that," Kesta said. The hall quieted by a fraction. Othric looked at her. "Then what do you say?" Kesta's fingers closed around the compass. "I say it does not point north because north was not what it was made to find." Another laugh, sharper this time. Vano lifted one pale brow. "A dead village breeds dead superstitions." Kesta looked at him. "A destroyed village breeds questions." The words reached the throne. Othric's expression did not change, but his gauntlet tightened once against the black armrest. Vano saw that too. "Majesty." "The grave," Marshal said smoothly. "The victory trial concerns lawful conquest, not servant grief. Lorne Hollow was recorded as battlefield waste. Its remnants have no standing. Kesta felt the compass needle twitch. Not toward Vano. Not toward the brazier. Toward the throne. Her breath caught. Othric noticed. "What did it do?" he asked. "Nothing," Vano answered before Kesta could. Othric's eyes remained on her. "I asked the servant." Hope was dangerous. It made the throat soft. Kesta swallowed it down. The needle moved. A noble scoffed. Toward what? The kitchen? The court laughed again. Othric held out one hand. "Bring it." Kesta did not move. The guards shoved her forward until she stood at the foot of the dais, close enough to see the faint blue scar running along the underside of Othric's jaw, close enough to see that Emberhald's shimmer behind him dimmed whenever the compass trembled. Othric studied the broken device in her palm. "This is what you carried from Lorne Hollow?" "Yes. And you believe it accuses my victory?" "No," Kesta said. The answer seemed to surprise him. She looked up at the throne, then at the dark marble beneath it. "I believe it is afraid of what your victory is standing over. Not a body. A filing." The hall hardened. Vano's grave rings clicked against each other. One ring clicked louder than the rest when the compass faced the throne. Othric's gaze cooled. "Careful." Kesta should have lowered her eyes. She did not. "My village lowered its eyes," she said. It burned anyway. The silence that followed was not pity. It was danger. Othric rose. Every blue flame in Ashgrave Throne Hall bent toward him. He descended one step from the dais, and the pressure of his presence moved through the court like heat before a dragon's wing. Kesta felt it in her ribs. Power, restraint, anger sharpened by something older than pride. He stopped before her. "Throw it into the fire," he said. The court watched her. Vano watched the compass. Kesta looked at the blue trench of dragon flame beside the trial brazier. If she obeyed, the last object from Lorne Hollow would become ash in the hall that had renamed her home waste. If she refused, the guards would take it and break her fingers to do it. She walked to the flame. Her hand shook only once. Then she threw the broken compass into the blue fire. The flame did not consume it. It turned black at the edges. The compass rose. The cracked glass sealed itself with blue light. The brass case opened like an eye. The needle spun so violently that the sound cut through the hall, bright and metallic, faster and faster until every grave ring on Vano's wrists began to tremble. Then the needle stopped. It pointed straight beneath Othric Mauldan's throne. The black marble split with a thin line of blue fire. The split was too exact to be gravestone and too old to be accident. Under the Dragon King's throne, where no grave should have existed for a living king, the floor revealed the outline of a buried stone slab. It was too narrow for a corpse and too formal for accident. Kesta heard Vano whisper, "Impossible." Othric turned slowly toward his own throne. The compass had not accused his victory yet. It had only found the first death entry. A death entry was not a corpse. It was a place war had taught the ledger to bury command. And the name carved beneath the blue flame was not Lorne Hollow. It was Othric Mauldan, not his body. His filed death. The compass had found Othric Mauldan's death entry, but not why a living king had been filed among the dead. A filed death could name the coordinate. It could not yet speak the command buried beneath it. Blue fire trembled inside the narrow slab beneath the throne, tracing Othric's name in letters too formal to be accusation and too cold to be prophecy. The court did not move closer. Nobles who had laughed at Kesta's broken compass now watched it hover above the dragon flame with the careful stillness of people hoping a thing they saw could become shameful enough to ignore. Kesta remained at the foot of the dais with soot on her hands and the strip of black cord still hanging empty at her throat. No one returned the compass to her. No one apologized for laughing. No one called Lorne Hollow by its name. Vino Carrick stepped between Kesta and the open floor, his bone-colored robes catching blue light at the hem. His grave rings trembled at his wrists, but his voice stayed smooth. A grave coordinate disturbance does not overturn a lawful victory trial. Othric had not sat back down. He stood near the edge of the dais, staring at the name beneath his throne. The blue scar beneath his jaw pulsed faintly. Behind him, Emberhald shimmered, like a dragon name, held behind glass. The glass did not hide the dragon. It held back the command. Emberhald did not strike. It did not rescue Kesta. It only flickered whenever the compass needle quivered toward the slab. Kesta looked from the dragon name to the grave rings. The compass had not chosen her. It had followed the false record she carried from Lornhollow. That was all. A tool did not become mercy because it finally spoke. She lifted her chin. Read what was buried under his name. Vano turned slowly. Grave coordinate records cannot be tried through a conquest servant's broken relic. Then why did your rings answer it? A few courtiers looked at Vano's wrists. One ring clicked louder than the others. The grave marshal folded that hand into his sleeve. Servant grief is imprecise. Conquered remnants attach meaning to battlefield debris because ruin requires a shape to hate. Kesta's mouth went dry. My village did not need a shape to hate. It had fire. Othric's gaze cut to her. Not soft. Sharper than that. What does the compass read? He asked. Vano answered before she could. Nothing withstanding, Majesty. Othric did not look away from Kesta. Let the relic answer. The compass spun once in the blue flame. Then the slab beneath the throne opened not upward, not like a tomb, but inward like a ledger page turning under stone. Thin lines of blue fire crossed its surface. The needle pointed down so hard the brass case shook. 4 lines appeared. Royal name entered. Death coordinate opened. Dragon command buried. Lornhollow route redirected. The slab had named the buried command. It had not yet named what Emberhold had tried to say. The hall lost its air. Kesta stared at the last line until the words cut through her. Lornhollow route redirected. She saw the old village road in her mind. White stones between winter fields. The ash grove where children hid from patrol horses. The low bridge her father had mapped twice because it flooded every spring. That road had led away from war. It had been their escape when the royal dragonfire came. Unless someone had changed where death believed the road went. Othric read the first line aloud, voice low. Royal name entered. The blue fire under the throne brightened around his name. Vano's face tightened. Majesty, ancient coordinate practice places royal names in strategic death ledgers to draw enemy killing, force away from the living crown. It is defensive grammar. Kesta looked at him. Grammar burned my village? Vano's eyes chilled. Battlefield waste cannot accuse strategy. The compass needle struck the slab with a ringing sound. The record opened. A war chamber appeared inside the blue flame. Not memory, not vision, a filed event. Othric's name was written on a black war slate before a map of roads. Vano stood beside the table, younger by only a few years, with grave rings stacked along one wrist. A commander marked Lornhollow as a minor route, not a target. Then Vano pressed Othric Mauldan's name into the slate. Death coordinate opened. The map changed. A line of blue fire moved beneath the royal name, then bent toward the road through Lornhollow. Dragon command buried. The record shifted. Emberhold's dragon command, bright and gold blue, rose above the war map like a living flame. It should have ordered retreat from civilian roads. It should have recognized a village route and veered skyward. Vano's ring clicked. The command sank beneath Othric's filed death. Not silence. Burial. Lornhollow route redirected. Kesta stopped breathing. The road did not burn because it was forgotten. It burned because refusal had been filed beneath a king's name. It burned because the buried command was made unable to refuse it. Othric took one step down from the dais. If my name was buried before Lornhollow burned, then my victory may have been standing on a death my court filed for me. Vano bowed. Your victory stood because we preserved your life. Othric's eyes darkened. By burying my command? By burying a necessary vulnerability. Kesta looked at the slab, then at the throne. You did not stand over my village by accident. Your name was placed beneath the road before the fire reached us. Othric's face closed around the blow. The throne had not burned Lornhollow by itself, but it had stood over the filing that sent fire there. Vano raised both wrists, grave rings flashing blue. Battlefield waste cannot be retried through servant grief. The slab began to seal. Kesta moved before fear could stop her. Stepping toward the blue fire where her compass still hovered. Guards seized her arms, but the needle screamed against the slab as if the record knew the hand that carried Lornhollow's death route had been pulled away. Read before he files the road wrong again, she said. The compass flared. Grave coordinate, active. Conquest, servant present. Royal death entry retained. Slab ceiling. Othric's hand lifted, then stopped. If he seized Vano now, the grave marshal would call the record broken by royal panic, and panic was easier to dismiss than proof. If Kesta was dragged back, the compass would lose the village route. If the slab sealed, Othric's name would remain a grave coordinate with no reason attached. The blue fire gave one final record. Othric's royal name entered before Lorne Hollow burned. A death coordinate opened beneath the throne. A dragon command buried under Victory Grammar, and the village road redirected into blue flame. Othric Mauldan had not been buried as a corpse beneath his own throne. His name had been entered as a death coordinate before Lorne Hollow burned, burying a dragon command under royal victory and redirecting the village route into blue fire. But the command itself had not yet been allowed to speak. The compass had named the buried dragon command, but not what Emberhold tried to refuse. A buried refusal could name what the dragon resisted. It could not yet name who wrote the command that replaced it. Blue flame stayed low around the slab beneath the throne, not spreading, not striking, only holding Othric Mauldan's death entry open like a wound cut into stone. The compass hovered above it, cracked brass, bright with cold fire, its needle trembling toward the buried name as if the floor had become a page it could not stop reading. Kesta remained in the guard's grip at the edge of the dais. No one released her arms. No one stepped aside because her village had been named. No one in Ashgrave Throne Hall mistook truth for freedom. Vano Carrick lowered his wrists slowly, grave rings dimming beneath his sleeves. The coordinate has spoken beyond its permitted range. Kesta looked at him. It has not spoken enough. Othric stood between the slab and his throne, blue light catching the hard line of his jaw. Behind him, Emberhold flickered in the high flame, not as a dragon descending into the hall, not as a protector, but as a name trying to push sound through glass. The buried command had not been allowed to speak, and the silence around it now felt crowded. Kesta pulled once against the guards. Their hands tightened. Othric noticed. His gaze dropped to their fingers around her arms, then returned to the slab. He did not order them away. Not yet. If he turned her into royal concern too soon, Vano would call every record servant manipulation. Kesta saw the calculation in his stillness, and hated that she understood it. She lifted her chin toward Emberhold's flickering name. Read what the dragon tried to command. Vano's face sharpened. Buried. Command records cannot be tried through a conquest servant's broken relic. The relic already found where you buried it. The relic is a grief object. It found your filing. The compass spun once. The grave rings clicked. Emberhold's shimmer flared so brightly that every blue flame in the hall bent backward from the throne. The slab beneath Othric's feet opened deeper, and the buried name split into lines that ran through the floor like map roots under ice. 4 records burned in blue-gold fire. Civilian route recognized. Dragonfire refusal issued. Grave ring seal applied. Royal victory command substituted. The refusal had spoken. The substitute command had not yet named its author. Kesta could not move. Civilian route recognized. The words tore through her because they were small and impossible and late. Her village had not been mistaken for a fortress. It had not been hidden beneath smoke. It had been seen, recognized, named correctly before blue fire fell. Othric read the second line, his voice low enough to sound dangerous. Dragonfire refusal issued. Emberhold flickered again. The record opened inside the flames. A war sky appeared over Lorne Hollow's road. Not ghost, not memory, not mercy. Only a command preserved badly beneath a king's filed death. Blue dragonfire gathered above the village route, vast enough to turn fields white with heat. Then Emberhold's command flared gold through the blue. Civilian road. Refuse fire. Turn east. For one breath, the entire hall saw the dragon command bend away from Lorne Hollow. Kesta's knees weakened. The guards held her up by force, not kindness. Then Vano's grave ring appeared in the record, pressed against the black war slate where Othric's death coordinate had been entered. The gold refusal sank under the royal name, like a body under stone. Not silence. Burial. And burial was only half the crime. Someone had written over the grave. The command changed. Victory route confirmed. Blue fire authorized. The words did not sound like a dragon. They sounded like a ledger pretending to breathe. Lornhollow vanished behind flame. Kesta made a sound she did not intend to give them. Othric turned his head toward her, and for the first time his face did not hold the clean distance of a king listening to accusation. It held something raw, more private, and worse. The sight of a man learning that even his dragon had tried to spare what his victory destroyed. Vano spoke quickly. Dragon refusals cannot be recorded over lawful conquest. Othric's eyes stayed on the record. It was recorded before you buried it. Majesty, a dragon, name in First War fracture, is unstable. Emberhald's refusal would have left your killing force exposed. The substitute command preserved your life and secured victory. Kesta stared at him. Your dragon saw us before the fire did. Someone buried the part of him that knew to turn away. Vano's mouth tightened. Villages do not command royal fire. No, she said, but they can be recognized by it. Othric looked at Emberhald's flickering name. If Emberhald refused the village road and my court buried that refusal, then my victory was not obedience. It was a gagged command. The words struck the hall harder than rage. Vano lifted both wrists, grave rings flaring blue. The command record must be sealed before unstable dragon. Name residue contaminates the victory trial. The slab began to darken. The gold line of Emberhald's refusal bent back towards stone. Kesta strained against the guards, pain shooting through her shoulders. Read before he buries the refusal again. The compass screamed. Buried command active. Conquest servant present. Dragonfire refusal retained. Grave ring seal closing. Othric moved one step toward Vano, then stopped so sharply his armor rang. His hands curled into fists at his sides. If he seized the grave marshal now, Vano would call it a king, protecting his pride from proof. And pride was easier to condemn than forged obedience. If Kesta was dragged back, the compass would lose the Lornhollow route. If Emberhald's command sealed, the court would keep the victory and bury the refusal beneath grammar. So Kesta held herself upright in the guard's grip and let the compass read through the false record she had carried out of ash. The slab burned one final time. Emberhald had not failed to recognize Lornhollow. The Dragon Command had identified a civilian route and issued a refusal before blue fire fell, but Vano's grave ring sealed that refusal beneath Othric's death coordinate and substituted a victory command in its place. But the victory command had not yet shown whose hand wrote it. The compass had read Emberhald's buried refusal, but not who wrote the victory command that replaced it. Blue flame still held the slab open beneath Othric Mauldan's throne, but the light had changed. It no longer looked like fire searching for a grave. It looked like ink trying to rise through stone. The broken war compass hovered above the slab, its needle fixed on the buried death entry, while Kesta remained trapped in the guard's grip with her arms held tight enough to bruise. No one freed her because the record had spoken. No one believed her because belief was still something the court believed it could withhold. Emberhald flickered behind the Dragon King, gold blue and restrained, a dragon name with its refusal exposed but not restored. It did not strike Vano. It did not sweep fire around Kesta. It did not save anyone. Its buried command had only proved that before Lornhollow burned, the dragon had tried to turn away. Now the hall waited to learn who made it turn back. Vano Carrick stepped toward the trial brazier, and the grave rings on his wrists glowed with a calm, practiced blue. The buried refusal has been unlawfully stirred. No further command record may be read. Kesta looked at him through the guard's hands. Read who wrote over the refusal. Vano's pale eyes sharpened. Victory. Command records cannot be tried through a conquest servant's broken relic. The relic found your buried command. It found a battlefield distortion. It found a command that did not sound like a dragon. Othric's head turned slightly. That reached him. The compass needle trembled. Under the throne, the slab burned brighter. Then, from beside Vano's trial brazier, a black metal book rose from the ash table, its cover sealed with blue wax and bone clasps. The ash ledger. Kesta had seen its shape only once before, when Lornhollow's name was read into conquest waste. Villages entered that book did not leave as places. They left as numbers. Vano lifted one hand toward the ledger. That book belongs to Grave. Marshal Custody. Othric's voice was low. Then let Custody answer. The ledger opened. Its pages did not turn. They breathed outward in strips of blue fire, each line pulling itself across the air until it connected the compass, the slab, Vano's rings, and the flickering dragon name behind Othric. 4 lines appeared. Ash ledger entered. Grave marshal seal applied. Dragon refusal overwritten. Royal conquest order issued. Kesta stared at the 3rd line. Dragon refusal overwritten. Not lost. Not misheard. Not unstable. Overwritten. The record opened inside the blue pages. The war chamber returned. Emberhald's command still hung above the map in gold-blue fire. Civilian road. Refuse fire. Turn east. Then Vano stepped forward in the record, opened the ash ledger, and pressed his grave marshal seal onto the page. The gold words strained, not like living flesh, but like truth forced beneath a heavier document. Dragon refusal overwritten. The page changed. Victory route confirmed. Blue fire authorized. Royal conquest order issued. The letters formed in Othric's name. The seal beneath them was Vano's. Kesta felt the old horror of Lornhollow become newly precise. Your dragon refused us. Your ledger answered for him. Vano's face did not move. The ash ledger carries emergency authority during First War fracture. A dragon name may hesitate when royal survival is under threat. The ledger completes conquest when hesitation would cost the throne. Othric stepped down one more stair. My dragon did not hesitate. It refused. Majesty, refusal and hesitation are often indistinguishable under war pressure. No, Othric said. You made them indistinguishable on paper. The court shifted. Not with belief. With fear of how close the words were coming to the throne. Vano bowed. The command preserved your victory. If the command that burned Lornhollow was written after Emberhald refused, Othric said, then my victory obeyed a hand that was not mine. The ash ledger flared. The sentence had struck something true, but Kesta did not let the king stand too clean inside it. The command used your name, she said, your throne, your dragonfire, your victory. Othric looked at her. The blow landed. She saw it in the stillness of his face. Refusal buried did not make him innocent. It made him responsible for what his court could do in his voice. Vano saw the space between them and moved to close it. He pressed both palms toward the ash ledger. Conquest orders cannot be unmade by the grief of the conquered. Conquest. The blue pages began to fold inward. Kesta struggled against the guards. Read before he seals his hand under your name again. The compass screamed so sharply that the nearest blue flames bent flat. Victory command active. Conquest servant present. Dragon refusal retained. Ash ledger closing. Othric's hand went toward the ledger, then stopped. Kesta watched him fight himself. If he tore the book away now, Vano would call it royal fear destroying a war record. If she was dragged back, the compass would lose the line between Lornhollow's route and the forged command. If the ash ledger closed, Vano's seal would vanish beneath Othric's victory forever. So Kesta stayed held. The compass stayed burning. The ash ledger gave one final record. Emberhald's refusal overwritten beneath grave. Martial seal. A royal conquest order issued in Othric's name, and blue fire sent through Lornhollow wearing the Dragon King's command. The command that burned Lornhollow had not come from Emberhald's will. After the dragon refused the civilian route, Vano's ash ledger overwrote the refusal under grave martial seal and issued a royal conquest order in Othric's name, making a forged command, wear the Dragon King's victory. The ash ledger had shown the forged command, but not what the forged command bought. Blue fire still curled around the open book, bending over the pages like it feared reading further. Vano Carrick's seal burned in the air beside Othric Mauldan's name, clear enough for the court to see, and dangerous enough for the court to pretend sight had become uncertain. Kesta remained between the guards with their fingers locked around her arms. Her wrists ached. Her shoulders burned from being held upright. The compass hovered beyond her reach. It had not flown to her hand. It had not shielded her. It only kept pointing toward the throne because the false death beneath it was not finished speaking. Othric stood one stair below his throne, the blue light marking the sharp planes of his face. Behind him, Emberhald flickered with the buried refusal now exposed. But the dragon name still looked strained, held back by something deeper than one forged command. Kesta saw it in the way the gold-blue fire pulled toward the slab and stopped short. The refusal had been buried. The order had been forged. But a forged order did not burn a village for nothing. Kesta looked at the ash ledger. Read what the command purchased. Vano turned his head slowly. Conquest. Value records cannot be tried through a conquest servant's broken relic. Kesta's voice stayed low. You keep naming me conquest servant because you need Lornhollow to stay conquered before the record reads. A few nobles shifted. Othric did not. His eyes were on Vano now, not in surprise, but in calculation. Let it read. Vano's grave rings clicked once. Majesty, war value is sovereign matter. My name was used to issue the order, Othric said. Then my name will hear the value. The ash ledger opened wider. A line of blue fire ran from the ledger to the compass. From the compass to the slab under the throne, then outward across the floor. The black marble became a war map, pale roads and village names appearing under the court's feet. Kesta saw Lornhollow written in small letters near the lower edge of the map. Small. That nearly broke her. Her whole childhood, her mother's hands, her father's routes, the ash grove, the low bridge, the winter roofs, the people who shared bread during siege warnings, all reduced to a small line beneath royal strategy. The compass needle struck toward the map. 4 records burned across it. Village names entered. Royal death divided. Living title preserved. Conquest waste recorded. The hall turned silent in a different way. Kesta felt the second line before she understood it. Royal death divided. Not avoided. Not healed. Divided. Othric read it aloud, and his voice lost its cold edge for the first time. Royal death divided. Vano spoke quickly. First War fracture law permits symbolic death displacement when the crown is under existential threat. Kesta stared at him. Symbolic? The map answered before he could. The record opened. A battlefield appeared in blue flame. Othric Younger, wounded beneath a sky torn by dragonfire, his armor split near the ribs, his hand pressed against the wound as Emberhald burned above him in a broken arc. Death stood over him, not as a figure, not as a ghost, but as a coordinate in the ash ledger. A black mark, moving toward his royal name. Then Vano entered the record. He opened the ledger. He wrote Lornhollow. Not once, again and again. Not as a village, as names. Kesta saw them appear in columns. Rill, Tamsin, Orlo, Bryn, Velk, children and elders and mapkeepers and kitchen women and cart boys, every name pulled into the ledger as small death holders. The black coordinate over Othric's name broke apart, scattering into the village list. Royal death divided. Living title preserved. Othric staggered one step, not from weakness, from understanding. The court saw it and looked afraid. Vano lifted both hands. Your life was preserved for the kingdom. Kesta's voice came out hollow. My village was turned into pieces of your death. Vano's face hardened. They were already within the conquest field. They were on a civilian route your own dragon refused. And the king lived, Vano said. The words struck the hall like a door slammed shut. Othric looked at him. You placed my death into their names. I preserved the living crown. You placed my death into their names. This time the word sounded less like a question than a sentence trying not to become execution. Kesta looked at Othric. You survived wearing their deaths as proof of victory. The command had used his name, his throne, and his dragonfire. Now the record had named what it bought. His survival had been built from a village ledger the court called waste. Othric's jaw tightened. I did not order this. Kesta's eyes stung, but she did not let tears fall. No, but your life stood where their names were buried. The compass spun once. The slab under the throne pulsed. Vano moved fast, pressing his grave rings toward the map. Death. Division records cannot be opened by the grief of filed remnants. Kesta pulled against the guards. Read before he makes their names waste again. The ash ledger screamed. Death division active. Conquest servant present. Village names retained. Ledger sealing. Othric moved toward Vano, then stopped with visible fury. If he tore the ledger away, Vano would call the record destroyed by a king desperate to deny his survival. If Kesta was dragged back, the compass would lose the village names. If the ledger sealed, Lorne Hollow would remain conquest waste instead of the place where a king's death had been divided. Kesta looked at the small name of her village burning beneath the court's feet. "Read them," she whispered. "Not the village. Them." The blue map flared. The final record opened in columns of name light, each Lorne Hollow life carrying a fragment of Othric's first war death, while his living title rose clean above the battlefield. Lorne Hollow had not been destroyed as battlefield waste. Its people had been entered as death holders, their names used to divide Othric Mauldan's first war death so the Dragon King could survive while the village was recorded as nothing. The columns of Lorne Hollow names kept burning after the map faded, as if the hall itself did not know how to stop counting them. Kesta stared at the blue-lit names until they blurred. She had expected ruins. Ash. A road redirected. Even a forged command, once the compass began speaking in the language of buried war. But names were worse. Names refused to stay large enough to be tragedy or small enough to survive. Rill. There it was among the columns. Her father's name. Her mother's? A younger brother who had never learned to tie his boots properly because he preferred running barefoot through winter mud. The ash ledger had not swallowed Lorne Hollow whole. It had taken them one by one, which meant someone had looked long enough to choose them. Kesta pulled once against the guards. Their hands tightened again, and one of them muttered for her to stand still. She almost laughed. She had been still for 7 years. Still, while nobles called her village waste. Still, while war banners were hung from conquered silk. Still, while she cleaned victory ash from armor that had burned her home. The compass hovered above the fading map, its needle shaking over the name columns. Othric Mauldan did not speak at once. The silence around him had changed. It no longer sounded like command. It sounded like a man standing before a grave too crowded for one body. Vino Carrick moved toward the ash ledger. The Death Division record has exceeded necessary disclosure. Kesta's voice came raw. Necessary for whom? The grave marshal looked at her, and for the first time the old patience did not return quickly enough. For the survival of the crown. She looked at the names. Then read why their names could hold his death. Vano's grave rings flashed. Name capacity records cannot be tried through a conquest servant's broken relic. Kesta did not flinch at the phrase anymore. You used conquest to take the names? You used servant to make me too low to question them? You used broken because the compass survived what your ledger did not want found? The court went quiet. Othric's gaze moved to her. Something passed through his face. Not softness, not forgiveness, but a sharper kind of attention. The kind given to a blade after it cuts through armor. Let the names read, he said. Vano's jaw tightened. Majesty, let them read. The compass struck the air once, hard enough to ring like metal against stone. The ash ledger opened again. This time the blue fire did not spread across the war map. It rose around the name columns, circling them in thin lines that looked like roads drawn from memory. Each name became a small coordinate. Each coordinate bent toward the cracked compass. 4 records burned over the floor. Graveroot Village entered. Compass line identified. Death-bearing names selected. Royal survival distributed. Kesta stopped breathing. Compass line identified. Her father's compass had not simply survived Lorne Hollow. It had been part of why Lorne Hollow was chosen. The record opened inside the blue fire. Lorne Hollow appeared before the burning. Not as ruins, not as smoke, but as a living village beneath gray morning light. Kesta saw the map house near the lower bridge. Her father at the table, marking safe paths for evacuees. Her mother hanging death tags for travelers whose bodies could not be recovered from old battle roads. The broken war compass lay open between them, whole then, its needle turning not north, but toward a set of names carved on bone slips. A woman in village gray spoke softly in the record. If the dead cannot come home, the compass must find where the record hid them. Kesta's mother. Kesta made no sound. The record shifted. Vano stood outside the map house with royal soldiers. He watched the compass turn toward an unmarked death from an old border war. Then he looked at the village ledgers. Compass line identified. Death-bearing names selected. The scene changed to the war chamber. Vano's hand moved down the list. Not blindly, not hurriedly. He chose names from families tied to grave routes, death tags, burial ledgers, compass records. People whose names already knew how to hold misplaced death because their village had spent generations returning the lost to their proper record. Kesta's throat closed. They could hold death, Vano said, not looking at her. The old grave root villages were built for it. They were built to return it, she whispered. Othric turned on him. You chose them because their names could carry what mine could not. Vano bowed slightly. Because their names could stabilize what would have killed you. Their names were not yours to use. No, Kesta said, looking at Othric now. But your survival wore them anyway. The words found him. He did not deny them. That mattered less than it should have. The command had used his name, his throne, his dragonfire. The death had used her people's names. A king could be deceived and still stand on the bodies the deception bought. Vano raised his grave rings toward the columns. Grave root records are extinct by conquest. Their functions belong to the crown. The name columns began to fold inward. Kesta strained against the guards. Read before he makes our duty into your property. The compass screamed. Name capacity active. Conquest servant present. Compass line retained. Ledger closing. Othric took one step toward the guards holding Kesta, then stopped. Kesta saw the cost of it. His fury wanted to become rescue. Rescue would give Vano a cleaner way to close the record. So the Dragon King stood still while the woman his court had mocked remained gripped by soldiers, because proof still needed the wound of her presence more than it needed his shame. The compass burned white-blue. The final record opened. Lornhollow chosen because its grave root families could hold misplaced death. The Rill compass line, identified before the attack, death-bearing names selected from those who had once returned false burials to truth, and Othric's survival distributed into the village ledger. Lornhollow had not been chosen at random. Its people were selected because their names came from grave root bloodlines trained to find misplaced death, turning a village that once corrected false graves into the perfect ledger to carry a king's hidden death. The name columns had shown why Lornhollow could carry a king's hidden death, but not why Kesta had been left alive to carry the compass. The final record faded from the floor in thin blue threads, leaving the Ashgrave throne hall colder than before. Kesta remained between the guards, arms held hard enough that her fingers had begun to lose feeling. The compass hovered beyond her reach, its cracked brass case bright with the names of the dead it had just read. It did not come back to her. It did not comfort her. It only turned, slow and exact, as if the next wrong filing had begun pulling at the needle. Othric Mauldan's gaze followed it. So did Vano Carrick's. That was how Kesta knew the next record belonged to her. She felt the realization like a hand closing around her throat. It was one thing to hear that Lornhollow had been chosen because its names could carry hidden death. It was another to wonder why the girl who carried the last working relic of that village had been dragged into the Dragon King's hall and kept close enough to polish victory armor. Vano's grave rings cooled against his wrists, but the smallest one near his left thumb still flickered blue. Kesta saw it. Othric saw her seeing it. Why was she kept in Ashgrave? He asked. Vano turned with practiced calm. Conquest servants are assigned by labor need. Kesta's mouth tightened. Then read the assignment. The grave marshal's eyes cut to her. Survivor, assignment records, cannot be tried through a conquest servant's broken relic. You keep calling it broken because it keeps reading. A breath of dangerous silence moved through the hall. Othric did not smile, but something in his eyes sharpened. The compass spun once. Vano lifted his hand toward the ash ledger. Majesty, survivor lists are administrative aftermath. Then they should not fear a compass, Othric said. The ledger opened again. This time the blue fire did not spread through maps or names. It rose in a narrow column around Kesta, not touching her, not shielding her, only marking the air between the guard's hands and the empty cord at her throat. The compass needle pointed directly at her breastbone where it used to rest. 4 lines burned in the column. Rill daughter retained. Compass, contact bound. Witness standing erased. Death root anchor assigned. Kesta could not speak. Death root anchor. Not survivor. Not servant. Anchor. The record opened. Lornhollow appeared after the fire, not during it. The village road lay black beneath blue ash. Roof beams smoked. The low bridge had cracked. No one rose. No dead called out. No spirits gathered. Only Vano moved through the ruin with 2 soldiers and a ledger clerk, his grave rings glowing when he passed the map house. A child's hand shifted beneath a fallen table. Kesta saw herself, small, soot-covered, breathing. The compass lay cracked beneath her ribs, one half buried in ash, the needle still spinning toward names that had been filed wrong. One soldier raised his blade. Vino stopped him. "Not that one," he said in the record. Kesta's skin went cold. The soldier lowered the blade. Vano knelt beside the child she had been and placed 2 fingers on the cracked compass. The needle stopped spinning for one breath and pointed toward Othric's buried death coordinate. Compass contact bound. The scene shifted. Ashgrave service ledgers opened. Kesta's name entered not under protected witness, not under displaced child, not under village survivor. It was entered under conquest servant. Her witness standing was crossed out before it was ever offered. Her age was reduced. Her village claim was marked emotionally unstable. Her compass was listed as harmless debris permitted for containment. Death route anchor assigned. Othric turned toward Vano slowly. "You kept her near my throne." Vano bowed his head. The compass line required proximity to the death coordinate. If the relic wandered, the distributed death could destabilize. Kesta heard the meaning beneath the clean words. She had not been spared. She had been stored. "You made me clean the hall that buried my village," she said. Vano's expression stayed still. "You were given life." "No," Kesta said. "I was given a leash long enough to polish the grave." The words struck the court with the quiet force of something too precise to dismiss. Othric's face changed. Not enough to soften him. Enough to wound him. "If she was kept in my hall to anchor a death my court hid," he said, "then every year she served my victory, I made her grief hold my life in place." Vano's rings flashed. "Majesty, the anchor preserved you." Othric's voice lowered. "By erasing her witness, by containing a dangerous relic line." Kesta looked at him. "You did not let me live because I was harmless. You let me live because my grief kept your filing still." The compass shook violently. The blue column around her began to collapse inward. Vano pressed his ring toward the ledger. "Anchor records must be sealed. A conquest servant cannot convert containment into accusation." The guards tightened their grip, as if the record itself might pull her away. Kesta did not struggle this time. She stood very still and looked at Othric. He moved one step toward her, then stopped. She saw the restraint again. The fury he could not spend without handing Vano away to bury the proof. It did not absolve him. It only kept the record breathing. Kesta lifted her chin. "Read before he calls my survival mercy." The compass flared blue-white. Anchor record active. Conquest servant present. Witness standing retained. Ledger sealing. The final record opened. Kesta Rill found alive in the ruins. The broken compass bound to her body as the last contact with Lorne Hollow's death route, her witness standing erased, her service assigned near the throne, so Othric's hidden death coordinate would remain stable beneath his living title. Kesta had not been spared from Lorne Hollow's destruction. She had been retained as a death route anchor, kept close to the Dragon King's hidden grave so her broken compass and buried grief could hold his filed death in place. The guards held Kesta harder after the anchor record opened, as if a girl could become more dangerous simply by learning why she had been kept alive. Her arms ached beneath their grip. The empty cord at her throat swayed where the compass had once rested, and the broken brass relic hovered above the slab under Othric's throne, turning slowly in blue fire. Kesta could feel it even without touching it, not calling her, not choosing her, pulling on the false filing that had used her life as a weight. Vano Carrick watched the compass with the first true fear Kesta had seen on his face. Not fear of grief, fear of function. Othric saw it too. "What did you keep her from doing?" the Dragon King asked. Vano's jaw tightened. "The servant has already destabilized a delicate war structure. Further exposure endangers the living crown." Kesta's voice came out quiet. "You mean me?" The grave marshal turned toward her. "You were contained because your village carried unstable death route practices." "No," she said, looking at the compass. "You contained me because the compass did not stay broken." The blue needle snapped toward her so sharply that every flame in the hall bent with it. A murmur moved through the court. Vano lifted both wrists. Bearer, status records cannot be tried through a conquest servant's grief. Kesta almost smiled. Not because anything was funny. Because he had finally changed the word. Bearer. Othric heard it. His eyes narrowed. What bearer? Vano's expression closed. A village superstition with no royal standing. Kesta swallowed around the old ash in her throat. Read what I was made to hold. The compass spun. The slab beneath the throne opened a second seam, and the ash ledger's blue pages shuddered from the brazier table as if pulled by a wind no one else could feel. Light ran from the compass to Kesta's empty cord, then down through the floor into the death entry under Othric's name. 4 lines burned in the air between her and the throne. Grave compass bearer entered. Death root return suppressed. Royal death stabilized. Village names bound. Kesta stared at the first line until the hall disappeared around it. Grave compass bearer. Not chosen. Not blessed. Entered. A category in a ledger. A function Vano had used without ever naming it aloud. The record opened. Lorne Hollow appeared again, but older than Kesta had ever seen it. Before the burning. Before the war banners. Before her own grief. A line of villagers stood near the map house beneath gray dawn, each holding a compass on a black cord. They did not command spirits. They did not raise the dead. They marked false burials and returned hidden deaths to proper names. When a soldier vanished under another man's title, when a lord buried peasants beneath battlefield numbers, when conquest filed the dead wrong, the compasses found the place where death had been made to lie. Then the record shifted to Kesta's mother, kneeling before a child. Kesta, fastening the cracked brass compass around her neck. Carry only what must be returned, her mother said. The vision vanished. Kesta's chest hurt more than her arms. Vano spoke over the record. Grave root villages practiced unauthorized death correction. Their work interfered with royal consolidation of war loss. Othric's voice dropped. They corrected false graves. They disrupted lawful victory accounting. Kesta looked at him. They returned the dead to their names. The compass flared. Deathroot returned suppressed. The record showed Vano standing over Kesta in Ashgrave service years after Lorne Hollow. She was older, thin, silent, scrubbing blue ash from a victory shield. Her compass twitched beneath her dress whenever Othric passed the throne. Vano's ring flashed each time, pressing the needle still before it could point. Royal death stabilized. The record shifted again. The names of Lorne Hollow glowed beneath the throne, carrying pieces of Othric's hidden death. Whenever Kesta came near the hall, the compass tried to turn the death route back toward its proper filing. Vano's grave rings forced the needle dull. Her grief was kept close enough to hold the route steady, and weak enough not to return it. Village names bound. Kesta felt the words settle into her bones. You made me the lock, she said. On my own dead. Vano's face sharpened. You were a necessary containment of a dangerous correction line. Othric turned on him. If her compass was kept close to keep my death from returning, then my throne has been using her grief as a lock. Vano answered quickly. To preserve the crown, to preserve a lie beneath it, to preserve you, Majesty. The words hung there, poisonous and almost tender. Kesta looked at Othric. Preserved by names you did not ask for, kept by a village you did not mourn, stabilized by a servant you let them mock. Othric did not flinch. He deserved to, but he did not look away. Vano raised his grave rings toward the compass. Bearer records must be sealed. A grave. Compass bearer cannot reopen royal death without collapsing the living title. The blue light began to tighten around the compass. Kesta pulled against the guards. Read before he turns my mother's work into treason. The compass screamed. Bearer record active. Conquest servant present. Death route return retained. Grave rings closing. Othric moved toward her guards this time, one violent step, then stopped again with visible effort. The hall watched him struggle not to turn guilt into a rescue that would bury the record. Kesta saw the anger in his hands. She also saw the truth. If he freed her before the compass finished, Vano would call the bearer record corrupted by royal attachment. So she stayed held, so the record could breathe. The final image opened in blue fire. Kesta Rill marked as grave. Compass bearer. Her death root returned suppressed. Othric's hidden death stabilized beneath the throne, and Lornhollow's names bound in place because the one survivor who could find the false filing had been kept too close to the grave to escape it. Kesta had not carried a broken compass. She had carried the only instrument in Ashgrave capable of finding a living king's hidden death and returning it to the name where war had first filed it wrong. Vano reached for the compass because the last record had named the one thing his office could not leave intact. Not Kesta's grief. Not Lornhollow's ash. The return, the broken brass relic hovered above the slab beneath Othric's throne, blue fire threading through its cracked glass. Its needle no longer shook like damaged metal. It held still with terrible patience, aimed at the hidden death beneath the Dragon King's living title. Kesta remained between the guards, arms still gripped, body aching from restraint. The court had learned she was a grave compass bearer, but knowledge had not made them release her. It had made them more afraid to let her move. Othric stood at the foot of the dais now, no longer above the proof, no longer safely seated over the false grave. Behind him, Emberhald's name burned brighter than before, but still strained at the edges, like a dragon trying to breathe through a sealed door. It did not break the guard's hands, it did not shield Kesta. The dragon name had a refusal, not freedom. Vano lifted one grave ring toward the compass. A bearer record cannot remain open inside a living throne hall. Kesta's throat tightened. Because it can return what you hid. Because it can kill what it does not understand. Othric looked at him. What did you prepare to do with her? The question changed the air. Vano did not answer quickly enough. Kesta felt the guards tense around her arms. The compass needle shifted from the slab to her chest. No, not chest. Name. Vano's face went pale around the mouth. Kesta whispered. Read what he prepared. Vano's voice snapped through the hall. Final transfer records cannot be tried through a conquest servant's broken relic. Othric's expression hardened. You have called it broken through every record it survived. It survives because it is dangerous. It is dangerous because it reads you. The compass spun. The ash ledger slammed open on the brazier table. Blue flame tore across its pages, then ran to the compass, to Kesta's empty cord, and down into the death entry under the throne. The guards tried to pull her back, but the record moved with her because the filing had already named her contact. 4 lines appeared in the air. Bearer name entered. Royal death re-anchored. Village name sealed. Compass fracture completed. Kesta went cold. Compass fracture completed. Her fingers curled inside the guard's grip. She understood then why they had brought her to the victory trial. Not because nobles wanted to laugh at a relic. Not because Othric had noticed a servant's superstition. Not even because the compass had begun moving again. Because Vano had known it might. The record opened. Ashgrave service chambers appeared in blue fire. Kesta stood there earlier that same morning, carrying a tray of black cups, the compass hidden beneath her collar. Vano watched from the doorway. When the needle twitched toward the throne, he did not look surprised. He looked prepared. The scene shifted. The victory trial schedule lay open beneath his hand. Beside Kesta's name, written small, was a filing mark. Final anchor option. Bia name entered. The vision moved to the ash ledger. Othric's divided death burned beneath the names of Lornhollow. Vano drew one blue line from all those names into Kesta's. Not to restore them. To lock them shut. Royal death re-anchored. Village names sealed. Kesta's breath broke. He had meant to take every death her village carried, every name the compass could return, and bind them into the one survivor left close enough to hold the filing. Here. Othric read the final line. Compass fracture completed. Vano bowed his head. A broken relic cannot reopen what it can no longer read. Kesta looked at him. You meant to break it through me. You were already bound to it. My mother gave it to me to return false burials. And your village's practice made you uniquely capable of containing dangerous death displacement. Othric stepped toward Vano. You plan to use her as a final grave. Vano's eyes flashed. I plan to preserve the crown from collapse. Kesta stared at the blue line, running from Lornhollow's names into hers. You did not keep me alive as an anchor. You kept me alive as a lid. The words landed in the hall like iron. Othric looked at the record, then at Kesta. If he sealed the village names into you, my death would remain hidden, and the compass would stay broken, she said. Vano lifted his rings. The living title must stand. A king cannot carry the full return of First War death and remain whole. Othric's voice went quiet. Then perhaps whole was never what my throne was. The court stirred. Vano saw danger in that sentence and moved fast. He pressed both grave-ringed wrists toward the ash ledger. The final transfer will be sealed. The bearer has already destabilized royal survival. The blue line tightened around Kesta's name. Pain struck through her sternum as if the compass cord had become a chain under her skin. The guards flinched but did not release her. Othric moved toward them, fury darkening his face, then stopped again so violently the blue flames bent. He could not make her safety the excuse Vano needed to close the record. Kesta saw it. She hated it. She understood it. Read before he turns my name into Lornhollow's last grave. The compass screamed. Final transfer active. Grave compass bearer present. Village names retained. Compass fracture closing. Vano's grave rings burned white. The blue line pulled harder toward Kesta's name. She forced herself to stay upright. Not because she was strong enough, because if she fell, the filing would decide she had yielded. The final record opened above the hall. Vano's ash ledger, preparing to re-anchor Othric's hidden death inside Kesta Rill, seal every Lornhollow name beneath hers, and complete the compass fracture, so no buried refusal, death coordinate, or village route could ever be read again. Kesta had not been brought to the victory trial to be mocked. She had been brought there to become the final grave her compass would never be able to leave. The blue line tightened around Kesta's name, and Ashgrave Throne Hall finally understood that the trial had never been about a broken compass. It had been about making sure it stayed broken. Kesta stood between the guards with pain burning beneath her breastbone, where the empty cord at her throat seemed to pull inward toward the ash ledger. The compass hovered above the open slab, its cracked brass trembling so hard, the blue flame around it turned white at the edges. Beneath the throne, Othric Mauldan's death entry glowed like a wound the stone had hidden too long. Vano Carrick held both grave-ringed wrists toward the ledger. Complete the final transfer. The blue line pulled harder. Kesta's knees nearly buckled. The guards held her upright because the record needed the body it meant to seal. Othric saw that. His face changed not into tenderness, not into clean remorse, but into something colder and more final. A king realizing that every delay had a cost, and the cost was still being collected from the woman before him. "Stop," he said. The ash ledger did not stop. Vano's voice cut through the hall. "The final transfer is lawful. The bearer's name has been entered." Kesta forced air into her lungs. "Read what happens if my name closes." The compass screamed. Vano's rings flared. Final grave outcomes cannot be tried through a conquest servant's fear. Kesta's eyes lifted to him. "It is not fear." The compass struck the air like a bell. "It is the last record you need buried." Blue fire opened above the ash ledger. 4 lines appeared. Bearer name sealed. Village deaths unrecoverable. Royal death hidden. Grave compass silenced. The hall went silent enough to hear the flames breathe. Othric read the second line. Village deaths unrecoverable. Kesta closed her eyes for one breath. Not because she was weak, because if she looked at her family's names, while the ledger tried to seal them beneath hers, she might give the court grief instead of proof, and Vano knew how to call grief unstable. She opened her eyes again. "No." Vano's mouth tightened. "You do not refuse an entered function. I refuse being made into the last grave." The compass flared. The blue line around her name cracked. Not broke, cracked. Enough. Kesta pulled against the guards, not to escape, but to face the throne. "Read where the death belongs." Vano stepped forward. "The death belongs nowhere. A living title can survive." Othric moved before the guards could tighten their grip again. He did not touch Kesta. He did not seize the compass. He walked to the slab beneath his throne and placed his bare hand beside the carved death entry of his own name. The court recoiled. Vano's face went white. "Majesty, do not enter living contact with a filed death." Othric looked at the blue fire under his palm. "My name is already there. That filing preserved you. That filing burned Lornhollow in my voice." Kesta stared at him. This time he did not ask her to trust him. He did not make his guilt dramatic enough to replace hers. He only kept his hand beside the name the court had buried and said, "Read the living title beside the filed death." The compass spun once. Then the slab answered. Living title entered. Forged command exposed. Village names released. Royal death debt returned. The blue line around Kesta's name snapped. The guards stumbled back as if their own hands had been cut loose from the order holding them. Kesta did not fall. She swayed, caught herself, and stood without help, one hand pressed against her sternum where the final transfer had tried to make her hollow. The ash ledger burst open. Not with ghosts. Not with screaming dead. With names. Columns of blue fire rose through the hall. Rill, Tamsin, Orlo, Bryn, Velk, and hundreds more, each name returning from conquest waste into war debt record. They did not become bodies. They became impossible to deny. The compass dropped from the air. Kesta caught it against her chest. It was still broken, but the needle moved. Vano staggered back, grave rings cracking at his wrists. A living title cannot carry returned death debt. Othric stood above the slab, blue fire crawling up his gauntletless hand. His jaw clenched, but he did not pull away. Behind him, Emberhald's dragon name flared gold blue. It did not attack Vano. It did not shield Kesta. It roared only once through the hall, and the sound was not rescue. It was a command finally ungagged. Civilian fire forbidden. Conquest order void. Village names restored to debt. Grave marshal seal severed. Vano lifted one broken ring. "You will weaken the throne." Othric turned toward him. Then the throne was fed by what it had no right to eat. The words moved through the court like dragon fire under a door. Vano tried to close the ash ledger with blood from his own palm, but the pages no longer obeyed. The compass needle pointed to his rings, one by one, and each cracked open to reveal the filings beneath. Buried refusals, overwritten routes, transferred deaths, sealed names. His office had not preserved war history. It had taught victory how to hide bodies under grammar. Othric waited until the last ring broke. Only then did he give the order. "High Grave, Marshal Vano Carrick is stripped of war death custody, grave ring authority, and ash ledger command. He will stand trial before every surviving village record his office renamed Waste." The guards did not move at first. Then Othric looked at them. Not with anger. With the living authority his own dragon name finally answered. They took Vano by the arms. Kesta held the compass so tightly the cracked brass bit her palm. "Names first," she said. Othric turned back to her. She saw the king in him now, but not the clean one the court had worshipped. This one stood with a returned death debt burning under his skin, and no right to ask the wounded to soften the truth for him. "Yes," he said. "Names first. Then roots." "Yes." Then every grave filed under conquest waste. His throat moved. "Yes." She looked toward the throne. "And no victory trial can stand over a hidden death entry again." Othric removed the black gold crown from beside the throne and set it on the floor below the slab. "So ordered." The gesture did not heal Lorne Hollow. It did not return her mother, her father, her brother, or the road that had burned blue. But it lowered victory beneath the names it had buried. Kesta stepped toward the hall doors with the compass against her heart. Othric walked beside her at a careful distance, not claiming her, not asking forgiveness with his nearness. Behind them, Emberhald burned whole for the first time in 7 years, its command no longer trapped beneath a filed death. At the threshold, Othric stopped. "What do I owe you?" he asked. Kesta looked at the compass needle. For the first time since Lorne Hollow, it did not point to a hidden grave. It pointed forward. "You owe the dead their names," she said. "You owe the living the truth. And you owe me a kingdom where no servant has to carry a king's buried death to be heard." Othric bowed his head, not as a king granting mercy, as a man accepting debt. Kesta Rill had entered Ashgrave Throne Hall as a conquest servant with a broken compass the court mocked. She left as the grave compass bearer, the woman whose relic found where war had filed death wrong and forced the Dragon King's victory to answer for the grave beneath its throne.